minutes. It takes me an hour. I enjoy trying.
Look, I think it's one of those things, like I observed this with my father-in-law when he was with us, that, he's somebody who just, I think, actually enjoys tinkering with things. He likes fixing things. It's an enjoyment for him. So if you're in that world, but otherwise, right? I mean, that's exactly it. It could take me 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to do something that a guy who knows what he's doing is going to do in a half.
You can moderate a group as good as anybody.
Well,
everybody has their strengths.
Everybody has, actually, it's one of the great lessons I learned early on in life, right? Is that you don't have to be great at everything. Just figure out what you've got an aptitude for and try to.
Exactly.
I would not have been a good professional marathon runner, right? But I certainly can. I can sermonize from time to time. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Not a call. You may get a call, and I don't think. Someone said to me, "Do you have a rabbi?" I in Watermill needs a plot for his mother.
Okay.
I said, I don't think my rabbi is available on such short notice.
No, I mean, when it comes to funerals, I really do,
Hofnagel is the name.
Name sounds very familiar, actually.
It is, but they're not.
Yeah.
I got to show him plots.
Yeah.
And the funeral home is in Southampton. I said, why didn't you call?
Oh, O'Shea?
Yeah.
No, Leon had a relationship with them too. I think
Yes,
they're,
he did.
and every once in a while I get a call from them and I just haven't been able to.
Okay, I encouraged Leon to switch. I said, look, these guys pay for our booklet.
No.
I didn't know at the time.
You know what, man? I've now done whatever it is, 80, 90 funerals in the years, and I've done them everywhere.
Yeah.
There is nowhere I would pick, no funeral home I would pick over.
Really?
Yeah. Because, they know me, I know them.
Well, yes,
it's
exactly.
like there is an unspoken,
Exactly.
but I learned actually really early on that funeral directors are some of the most important people to become friendly with and in my line of work.
Oh, yeah.
Because if they know you, right? There was one guy works for Riverside, has worked there forever, knows my brother, knows me. And so, I watched this guy, he knows his job. Right. And then I've gotten a few of these guys who know nothing of what they're doing, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
So, for me, it lets me focus on what actually matters, which is the family,
A nail in a hammer to say.
I said, no, it's exactly, I say this also about wedding planners, like wedding planner, I've worked with many of them, right? And some of them are just.
I tell you a story.
Yeah.
Of Schultz a dozen times.
Dan,
did you get coffee?
Yeah. I still, but it just goes to show you, I'm really that dull. I just don't think in those terms. I never even think
That's
about
not your world.
Yeah, no, but it's also just like I realize when I'm working with these couples, I very rarely ask any questions about who they are professionally.
Why should you?
No, that's sort of it. But it turns out a lot of them are very interesting.
It's interesting when you socialize, and now in Florida when I travel, how do you find out about people? You got to be casual and subtle.
You know what? So
what do you do? What's your background? How much you make?
Subtlety and Florida don't go together in a sentence, I think.
Huh?
Florida Florida and subtlety do not generally go together, right? Those are not the.
I met a couple, Bill Gill, Irish Catholic.
It goes great on a business card.
Character.
Yeah.
Military man, Vietnam. Flew Secret Service or something, retired. And where I am, it's pretty conservative, a lot of red. So, but one day we're talking and his wife says, well, on CNN, I said, Ann, we're made.
you found your people.
Go no.
No. The truth is, that's probably the best litmus test you can ask these days, right? What channel do you watch? It's, boy, that's really funny. That's really funny. We got to get you to a bluer part of the state then, if it still exists. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Well, good job, Howard.
I was already to the fish market.
Is it open that early?
9 before 9.
That's why it's so.
I answered 9 o'clock. 10 to 9. I bought my fish.
I didn't even know that there was a farmer's market in Sag Harbor until I don't know what it was 6 months ago, and I was off for a Shabbos morning for whatever reason. And then somebody asked me to get something, and I was like, oh my God, this is going on, because I would have no idea, right? It's over, it's over before, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's too much of a conflict for you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Everything goes up, and she meets our back, she meets Pomeranian.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and especially for the two of them, because they can walk there if they want to, you know, it's great.
So, and
Yeah,
sometimes-
well, it's gonna be a bit nutty this weekend.
She said to me, you gotta buy fish, I can't go today. I said, yeah. She says, go in, 9 o'clock it opens, I was there at 10 to 9.
And that's where to get the fish? That's your go-to fish
Sometimes I
place?
go to the seafood shop.
Yeah,
If you want a nice meal,
I do.
cheap,
I like that.
prepared meal, the seafood shop.
Oh, I like it a lot. It's,
You go online, they have specials of the day.
ah,
It's a bargain.
Ah.
Food,
ready to go.
$12, $15, $20.
You know what my favorite thing is there? They have like a fried artichokes of all things, but it's
Me too.
like $15 a pound, you know, or $20 a pound. It's crazy,
A
but for the little thing, but I could eat
$15,
the entire thing, you know, but it's very good.
But like last Sunday or whenever, she said, check out what she want, I got what I want, and I don't think, I mean, look, go out that meal with $50 or more, it's $20.
That is that's great. I would take that.
Delicious stuff, I think I had. I don't remember what else,
Right.
Sunday, but she wanted maybe scallops, I had some fish. I think it costs us with the artichoke, it costs us $55.
So there you go. That's the deal, right?
$20 a piece and 15 for the artichoke.
I'm pretty
or
sure
less.
I'm pretty sure these days in Sag Harbor, just walking in the door means it costs you $20. That's, you know, just for the
Yeah.
privilege of walking in the door. I think that's where you're at, you know.
But
Wow, that's good. That's good to know.
And you know what I do? I order it for 5 o'clock.
Ah, perfect. So you just grab it. It's ready to go.
So I pick it up, we bring it home, it's warm, there's a meal.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'm gonna start doing this. Good.
Sometime,
Yeah,
and you look online, seafood shop, specials for the day.
good.
And I mean, it's a nice meal.
No, that's great. And I'm not great at cooking fish,
I'm
so.
no snob.
You know. Yeah.
You go to that same meal when I go to Bellanaca, it's 50.
Just for you. Yeah, for sure. That's it. All right. Well, we're gonna get started.
Is it time?
No, actually, it's more than time. I didn't really, we were lost in conversation. I didn't realize. Well, I'm sure for the many people who are watching exactly at 9:30, they're wondering what we're talking about, but you know. Okay, so we're on page 186. We'll begin our service certainly with a lot of thanks and gratitude. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha. Modeh ani lefanecha. Turn now to page 192, Matovu. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Israel. We'll turn now to page 194, blessing for our bodies together in Hebrew at the top of the page. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et adam bechokma uvara vo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. Kalui v'yadua lifnei chisech vodecha, she'im yipatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, yefshar lehitkayem v'lamod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai rofech kol basar u'mafli la'asor. Page 196. Elohai neshama shenatata b'tehorai. Elohai neshama shenatata b'tehorai. Elohai neshama shenatata b'tehorai. neshama shenatata bi tehorani. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorani. Let's read together on the bottom of page 197. My soul came to me pure, drawn from the reservoir of the holy. All the time it remains within me, I am thankful for its thirst for compassion and justice. Let my eyes behold the beauty of all creatures. Let my hands know the privilege of righteous deeds. Baruch atah Adonai asher b'yado nefesh kol chai beruach kol besar ish. We're now on the top of page 198, and we'll rise in body or spirit. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach bibina lafid meyom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokeh kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzvah degaber. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam al bisharumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'aev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir sheina meinai utnuma me'apapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani bet chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Israel bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Israel b'tifara. Please be seated. We're on page 205, the second reading down from the top. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth. O God of truth, deliver us. Blessed is Adonai, teacher of Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah lamo Yisrael. Page 206, the very top. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shiur, shadam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh. והקרן קיימת לו לעולם הבא, ואלו הם ניגוד אהבה וגמילות חסדים, והשכמת בית המדרש שחרית וערבית, והכנסת אורחים וביקור חולים, והכנסת כלה לוויית המת ועיון תפילה, ואהבת שלום בין אדם לחברו, ותלמוד תורה כנגד כולם. We'll rise as we turn to page 212, the opening blessing of Pesukei Dezimra. Baruch shehamar v'haya haolam baruch hu. Baruch oseh bereshit. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch ozer u'mekayim. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem al habriot. Baruch mishalem tzachar tov l'rehav. Baruch chalad v'kayam lanetzach. Baruch pohodeh u'matzil. Baruch shemot. Bishpachot u'bizmirot negadelecha. U'nshavecha nefercha v'naskir shimcha v'namlicha. Malkeinu Eloheinu. Yachid chayav olamim. Melech meshubach u'mufoad ad shemo hagadol. Baruch atah Adonai. Melech mehulal batishpachot. On page 214, you can be seated if you're standing. Please motion. Tov leodol Adonai. Tov leodol Adonai. Ulezamer leshimcha elyon. Tov leodol Adonai. Lehagid baboker chasdecha. Lehagid baboker chasdecha. Ve'emunatcha ba'aleilot. Ve'emunatcha ba'aleilot. וכינור, כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך רנן. מה גדלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יעללוך, עוד יעללוך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יעללוך, עוד יעללוך. סלח תסלח שביום שגזלו השם. ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה, 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 hallelujah. Psalm 150, page 218. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, el bekocho, hallelujah, kiauzo, hallelujah, bigurotav, hallelujah, kerokudo, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 beteka shofar, hallelujah, benebel bechinor, hallelujah, betofu machol, hallelujah, beminim behugav, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, betzir tzlei shama, hallelujah, betzir tzlei trua, kol hashama tehallelya, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. נשמת כל החי, תברך את שמך אדוני אלוהינו, תשמחו. Page 220. Ilufinu male shira kayam, Ushonenu rina kamon galam, Vesivtotinu shevach kemarchevei rakia, Vehinenu mehirot kashemesh vechayareach, Veyadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim, Veragleinu kalot חיילות, אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו. Can you sound the way? Now on page 222, the second paragraph down from the top. We'll rise for the concluding blessing of Pezuga Zimra on page 223 and stay standing through the Chatzi Kaddish and the Bar. Yishtabach Shimacha Alad Malkeinu Ahel HaMelech HaGadol HaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Kilecha Na'e Adonai Eloheinu Eloi Avotenu Ve'imotenu Sherush B'Chala V'Zimra U'Zumemshala HaNetzach Gedula U'Gvura Tila V'Tiferet Kedusha U'Malchut Brachot Ve'Hodaot Me'ata V'Ad Olam Baruch atah Adonai El Melech Gadol V'Tishbachot El HaHodaot Adonai Niflaot Abocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech El Chei HaOlamim Yitkadal V'Yitkadash Shemei Rabbai Ve'amad Yirach Yirtei V'yamich Malchutei V'chayefonu V'yamefonu Chayei D'Kol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala u'bizman kariv yimeru. Amen. Shmei Rabba v'barach le'alam le'amei almaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnasek v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yit'alal shemei dekucha. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata dameran ve'alma v'imeru. Amen. Baruch et Adonai Amevorach. Baruch Adonai Amevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Please be seated. Now on page 229 at the very top in English, and then back to 28 for Or Chadash towards the middle of the page in Hebrew. In the beginning, even then, a new light was sown for the righteous, a promise that your light would become the catalyst first for order and then for hope. Author of language and light, help us to use words as you have, to cast light into dark waters and draw out justice and truth. Or Chadash Al Tzion Tahir. Or Chadash Al Tzion Tahir. V'nizkechu lanu me'era le'oro. V'nizkechu lanu me'era le'oro. Yadadai bim bam, yadadai bim bam, yadadai bim bam, yadadai. Yadadai bim bam, yadadai bim bam, yadadai bim bam, yadadai Baruch Atah Adonai Yotzei HaMeorot. We'll turn to page 230 and we'll begin reading in English at the top and then the Hebrew at the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. והערנו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך, והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו. כי אל פועל ישועות אתה ובנו בחרת, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת. להודות לך ויחדך באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. On page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Page 236. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת. We're now on page 238, 4 lines up from the bottom 30. תהילות לאל עליון, ברוך ומבורך, משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לכהנו שיר בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילתו יוסף אלם, שירה חדשה שיפכו גאולים, לשמך שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל ומה בעזרת ישראל, ופרדכם ומך יהודה וישראל. בוא עלינו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל. We'll begin the Amidah together on page 242, and then continue silently from there. As always, please go at your own pace. When you're finished, if you are standing, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. If you're still davening your silent Amidah, continue. If you are finished, you can join us on page 324 for the repetition. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Koneh HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, Umei Gula Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Abraham v'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Atarav le'Oshia, Morid Hatal, Mechalkel Chaim b'Chesed, Mechayei Metim be'Rachamim Rabim, סומך נופלים ורופך חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לישני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. Page 326. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמרו, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו מלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ורחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. ראשית ברכה אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Shabbos. Okay, please be seated. We're on page 329. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת, קורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת, וקורא עונג שבת. מקדשי שבי שבת, כולם ישמעו יתענגו מטובך שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת, וקורא עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת, חמדת ימים אותו קראת שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת, וקורא עונג שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת, זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת, וקורא עונג שבת. אלוהינו, אלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, רצה רצה במנוחתנו. קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך. זהבנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעובדך באמת, והנחילנו. אדוני אלוהינו, Ya lai 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 ya lai 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 lai. B'ahava v'ratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'nuchuva Yisrael mekadshe shemecha Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Hashabbat. We'll now read together on page 330 in English. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai she'otcha levadcha b'yirah. We're now on the bottom of page 332. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha u'lecha na'eh leodot. Page 334, the very top. Sim shalom tova u'bracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yisrael ha'amecha Barcheinu yotzreinu kulanu kechad ve'or panecha ki ve'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova u'bracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ha'amecha Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka u'racha berachamim v'chaim b'shalom. Sim shalom tova u'bracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ha'amecha V'tov einecha lebarech le'tamcha Yisrael v'chol eitu v'chol shah b'shlomecha. Sim shalom tova u'bracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael Amecha Baruch atah Adonai Hamevarech et amo Yisrael B'Shalom. All right, let's turn to the bottom of page 336 and we'll read together in English. I need strength, humility, courage, patience, strength to control my passions, humility to assess my own worth, courage to rise above defeats, patience to cleanse myself of imperfections, and wisdom to live and learn by our sacred teachings. Let me not be discouraged by my failings. Let me take heart from all that is good and noble in my character. Keep me from falling victim to cynicism. Teach me sincerity and enthusiasm. Endow me with perception and courage, that I may serve others with compassion and love. Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al Yahase Shalom, Yahase Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahase Shalom, Yahase Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, everybody. So, Parshat Ki Teitzei is known for one thing in particular. Anybody know what its claim to fame is? Cameron doesn't know. There we go. That's 74, I believe. It is the most mitzvahs in one parsha.
Right.
And it is wide-ranging, to say the very least. It contains also my favorite mystical, mysterious, still don't really know the reason why, mitzvah of all of them, which is the mitzvah of shatnez, which is, every time I think of it, I think of Howard, who's our shmatologist. That one day the eminent shmatologist will explain to us why it is that we can't mix these things together. But, and shatnez produced actually one of these really interesting it's sort of a subculture or a sub-economy, like, in other words, that there are people whose entire job is just to check people's clothing for shatnez to make sure that it's kosher clothing. So it's a mashgiach of sorts. And I just think, it's one of the examples of how halakha unintentionally has created all sorts of other ripples just through its decision making.
Linen wrinkles.
Linen wrinkles. There you go. Linen wrinkles. And I think I learned also that, if you sweat too much, they're see-through. So this is another problem,
Wool comes back to shape.
Wool comes back to shape. So here we go. We've got, but then wouldn't we think that mixing things would be the ideal, right? That the mixture of take the best qualities of both and you'll end up with the better results. But
they don't want you.
But they don't want you.
I
was just going to say, that's what I'm saying. That's what this is. This shatnez,
Not as milk.
Yeah. But what's also interesting is, I remember growing up when I was taught this mitzvah and I was not in a sort of textual part of my life. When you hear the word shatnez, you assume that it's a more modern, like Yiddish word, but it's not. It really is in the Torah itself. It's one of these things where it's quite enigmatic. But it's an example of why this is sort of a very interesting parsha to dive into, because every pasuk actually is something that you can explore to a much greater degree. And what I find more and more fascinating every year that we come back to study this is to try to see whether there is anything that threads these various pieces together. Sometimes it's very obvious. One mitzvah flows into the next, but sometimes it's very halting. It seems like you're on one track and then all of a sudden it shifts in another direction. And as one of the great exercises that the rabbis gave to us over time is the idea that nothing is accidental, right? That there's something to learn from every element that we see, both that which is obvious and that which we have to dig a little deeper for. So if you have your Chumashim in front of you, when I'm reading in just a little bit, we're going to focus on the beginning of chapter 22. So in the Plowed Chumash, that begins on page 1323. Women's commentary begins on 1169. So Plowed again, 1323 at the very bottom.
1323?
Yes, 1323 at the very, very, very sort of last line of the Hebrew is the beginning of chapter 22. So we'll go on to the next page pretty quickly. And women's commentary again, 1169, or Deuteronomy Chapter 22 if you're following at home. And I want to focus actually on one particular mitzvah. And as I said, this whole section is just a series of them, of which I think in Torah study we'll get into a little bit more of the discussion of whether they have anything to do with each other. So in 22, we get a number of mitzvot to begin with, which are talking about sort of what to do. For example, if an ox or a sheep goes astray, and you get this repetitive word here, which is not an obvious word. It was originally going to be my drash for this morning, but I think we'll talk in Torah study. But the word behit alamta is basically telling us that we can't ignore it. We can't ignore a situation where we ourselves can actively participate in a tikkun, in a fixing of whatever the problem is. We can't ignore it, but the language of it is fascinating. It's not, again, the direct choice of words here, and it's more often than not translated idiomatically in the sense that people, translate it to make it what it's intended to be, right? This idea of you can't sort of turn away. But there are all these various readings by the rabbis about what this word is really trying to tell us. But principally, the idea is if something bad is happening in front of you, even if it's not your ox or your sheep or your house or your country or whatever, you have a responsibility to engage if there is something that you ultimately can do, whether it's returning the animal, whether it's taking them out of the hole they fell into. And again, these couple of verses end up becoming pages and pages and pages of discussion in Talmud, because they are taken basically as sort of case study and used as a specific instance to apply to a broader whole. And this happens throughout this parsha. In other words, that the 74 mitzvot that result from it is not just because we're listing them kind of in a useful order here, but because, again, the logic that the rabbis use is that everything that we're taught in halakha, all the pages of Talmud, all the pages of codes, they all derive somewhere from the Torah. There's always some proof text somewhere that brings us back to the original. And a lot of this is looking at, again, these sort of through lines. What is the consistency amongst all of them? It's building a sense of ethical responsibility. Whether we agree with each of these mitzvot, and I'm sure that we do not, there are several in here which are, for our sort of purposes, to be honest with you, abhorrent. But in principle idea, what are they saying consistently over and over again is that, we have an active responsibility by our behavior to change the world around us for the better when things are the worst. So the one I want to focus on, though, specifically is this very famous mitzvah of what you see in verse 6 and 7. If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs and the mother sitting over the fledglings or the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. In other words, do not take them to consume at the same time. And what are you to do? Let the mother go and take only the young. In other words, usually the eggs themselves, pretty much how we get our eggs in general. But here we get this very interesting last piece. Okay, we get an explanation as to why. In order that you may fare well and have a long life. Or we get a suggestion that there is a connection between this particular action and the outcome of our life being lengthy. So there are a lot of directions to go here, but I want to share a couple of them. And this is actually to give credit where it's due. The research work is an ancient one, is Rabbi Bachya, not Ibn Pakuda, but Rabbeinu Bachya, the other one was Bachya ben Asher, which is like, I think 13th century Spain. A lot of times he gets sort of covered over because the other Rabbeinu Bachya, Ibn Pakuda, is known as a really amazing, commentator. But the other Rabbeinu Bachya in this case is excellent, and he does some research for us. So here are a few explanations of this mitzvah and what we're supposed to learn from it, aside from the obvious. So Nachmanides, he says that you must be sure to send away the mother and take the young for yourself. According to the plain meaning of the text, the Torah's directive here is designed to protect the species from extermination. Even though the Torah permitted slaughtering of living creatures for the enhancement of a person's lifestyle, in other words, for the sake of us being able to eat meat and survive, the Torah did not mean to give a carte blanche for exterminating any species thereby. If one were to take both mother bird together with her young and eat them, it would be symbolically similar to exterminating that particular species. So this is one of those texts that I wish that I had seen a couple of weeks ago, last week when I was talking with Carl Grossman about environment and where we learn sort of ethical behaviors as it relates to this. But here it's not saying, obviously, if you take one bird and its children, you are not eliminating the species unless it was the dodo and you knew it was the last one. Okay, it's not saying that it's practically the case, but symbolically it has the effect of saying that our consumption, our need, or whatever it is that we're even allowed to do has limitations. And one of those limitations is that we cannot consume to the point of extinction. So again, here you have a very specific pasuk, but taking Nachmanides' read and expanding it, this is our entire environmental understanding, or our entire environmental ethic contained within this one teaching. Right? That we can and are permitted to consume, to use the natural world, to use even animals for our purpose of sustaining ourselves, etc. But to do so, right, to do so in this way, without any limitation whatsoever, is an excess. And it relates actually to my discussion last week about Bal Tashchit, right, of useless destruction of something. It's just not purpose. So Nachmanides gives us certainly something powerful to think about. Ibn Ezra adds that the words of the Torah say, in order that it will be good for you. In other words, if you will display concern for the survival of the species of these birds, God in turn will display his pity for you and will increase your days on earth as compensation for not having wiped out that family species of birds. So Ibn Ezra, in his sort of classic way, he can be a little bit sardonic sometimes, but he's basically, what is he saying? That this kola at the end about it'll be good for you is something of a reward for good behavior. That by not taking advantage of God's creation and exterminating it from the world, that God will have a certain amount of pity and will therefore lengthen our days as compensation. Less compelling, but interesting nonetheless, is something of a wrinkle to Nachmanides. But I think, again, taken together, we're drawing sorts something. Now, Maimonides, he takes this not in a different direction, but I think he adds an important layer. So in his Guide for the Perplexed, the Moreh Nevuchim, he offers the following rationale for this commandment. He says that the Torah does not want the mother bird to experience the anguish of watching to see herself being deprived of her chicks. The situation is analogous to the prohibition of not slaughtering the calf and its mother on the same day, which comes earlier in Leviticus, so that the cow does not watch the death of its own calf. The love of a mother animal for its young is not determined by intellectually rationalized feelings, but by something more profound in the psyche of the animal. It reflects its power of imagination. If the Torah is so concerned with the feelings of birds and four-legged domesticated animals, Maimonides says, how much more so it is concerned with the feelings of human beings. The legislation, therefore, is designed to teach, in addition to what it teaches about our relationship to the animals, is to not practice cruelty, even when such cruelty is only of an emotional nature, which I think is a very interesting and important kind of wrinkle. That, one can read these texts and think only on a sort of physical plane, right? About, we know we're not supposed to prolong suffering of animals that we slaughter. We understand all of those things in the physical realm. But what's being discussed in these two related mitzvot, the one of sending away the mother bird and the one of not slaughtering the calf and the mother, right, in the same case, is about also understanding the emotional distress that we can cause as well. It's not always a matter of physical harm. Sometimes the emotional harm that we can do to each other, even to some degree to ourselves, is actually worse in many cases than the physical pain. And you can see this manifest itself in countless ways. Those of us that have worked with young people in particular, the emotional distress that they can cause to each other, especially in their teenage years, is manifold. I mean, it's a heartbreaking experience in many cases, even for the ones who quote unquote seem well adjusted or in a popular group or whatever it might be. The way that even within those groups they attack each other, right? The emotional pain that can be caused is a deep and profound thing. And I think that especially as we enter this very holy period of our year, where we are really taking the time to think, where are the places in which we as human beings can improve our lives and the lives of the people that we share our lives with? One of the great places to start is to really do an accounting, right? And to try to think about, where are the places in our lives, whether intentional or otherwise, that we cause emotional distress to others, and to do our very best, right, to rein that in. It may be impossible to eliminate entirely. We all have our moments. I certainly do. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of times where, whether it's ego, exhaustion, hunger, frustration, anger, any of the other emotions that push us to put out our emotions into others in a negative way, I think we can come back, believe it or not, to this pasuk, right? This pasuk about shooing away the mother bird, because in the end, it's not about practicality, right? I think Nachmanides is right that this is really actually on a very symbolic level. If you cause the distress to one animal, the world itself is going to keep spinning. Right? The world is going to keep spinning. Everything will continue on as it is. But at the end of the day, right, that animal who's had to then watch their children taken away forever is scarred, forever. And it doesn't, I appreciate very much Maimonides' point here that certain things are not just what human beings are capable of. And if you think that animals don't have this relationship with their young, I think, Maimonides is not known necessarily as let's say an overly compassionate person or anything of that. He's very practical in this way, but he understands it. And he understands it simply because your eyes can observe it. Walk around the Hamptons, you will see any number of animals, especially in the springtime with their children. Tell somebody that they don't have that kind of connection. And so the ultimate point the rabbis make is, if we think that way about animals, then we can extrapolate what that means ultimately for our relationship with human beings, and even conceivably for our relationship with God. So again, all this from, 2 psukim, but you can do this deep dive with almost anything in this parsha, and you will find stuff that is both thought-provoking and in some cases really quite challenging. So we'll get into a little bit more of that, and my plan for Torah study actually is to do a little bit of exploring about how we get the concept of the 613 mitzvot and how one engages with the study of mitzvot in general and how they relate back to the Torah. The power of Safari will give us a lot to work with, I think. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. We're going to start our Torah source in a moment, maybe right before we start. So Alan or Sue, either of you feel up for an aliyah? Because I know Howard's going to turn me down.
So,
Okay, good. So I forgot the big placard up there, but I'll tell you the page when we get there. And then Howard, maybe you can go by for me this morning. Yeah, no, I'll get you when we get there. Don't worry. We're a few minutes away. Okay, so we'll turn again, page 362, and we'll rise in body or spirit. Ein kamocha b'Elohim Adonai ve'ein k'ma'asecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch leolam va'ed Adonai Yehovah lo yitein Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom Avarachavim etiva v'ertzoncha et Zion tivnei chomot Yerushalayim ki b'cha levad batachnu melech elam v'nisa Adon olamim ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah udevar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch shenatan Torah Baruch shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael b'kdushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Galul Adonai Tivunehom Shemo Yachtav Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Hatiferet V'Hanetzach V'Hahod Yichol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Yichol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha Ve'amid Nahaseh Lechol Erosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodesh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodesh. Okay, please be seated. Sure, in the right spot. Okay, Howard, you come help me here. Great. So again, page numbers 1323 in the Cloud Chumash and 1171 in the Women's Commentary. And Sue, you have the blessing ready? You're on page 368. And then we'll call you up to the Torah and our way. Talmud, no, you can stay right there. Talmud, what's your Hebrew name? Sarah Bat Zisel V'Laib? No,
Zisel.
okay, good. The Aliyah Harishona. Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chavanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch
Amen. Amen. Lo tireh et shor achicha o et seor nidachim והתעלמת מהם השב תשיבם לאחיך ואם לא קרוב אחיך אליך ולא ידעתו ואספתו אל תוך ביתך והיה עמך עד דראש אחיך אותו והשב אותו לו וכן תעשה לחמורו וכן תעשה לשמלתו וכן תעשה לכל עבודת אחיך אשר תאבד ממנו ומצאת לא תוכל להתעלם. לא תראה את חמור אחיך או שורו נופלים בדרך והתעלמת מהם הקם תקים עמו לא יהיה לי גבר על אישה ולא ילבש גבר שמלת אישה כי תאהבת אדוני אלוהיך כל עושה אלה כי יקרא כאן סיפור לפניך בדרך בכל עץ על הארץ אפרוחים או ביצים והאם רובצת על האפרוחים או על הביצים לא תיקח האם על הבנים שלח תשלח את האם ואת הבנים תיקח לך למען יתאהב לך והארכת ימים כי תבנה בית חדש ועשית מעקה לגגך ולא תשים דמים בביתך כי פה הנופל ממנו לא תזרע כרמך כליים פן תקדש המלאה הזרע אשר תזרע ותבואת הכרם לא תחרוש בשור ובחמור יחדיו לא תלבש שעטנז צמר ופשתים יחדיו גדילים תעשה לך על 4 כנפות כסותך אשר תכסה בה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת בחיי עולם ותחתינו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו
Amen. Yasher Koach, Susan. And Yasher Koach, Howard. That's good. We got Shlivovitz back last week. We got Howard back as Gabbai. Things are really moving in a good direction. All right. Yeah. All right. So. Yeah. All All right, so we're going to turn to page 371 to offer our Mishaberach this morning. Mishaberach Avatenu v'Imotenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov. Sarah v'Kara Rachel v'Liyavarech et Acholim ha'elu. This morning we are thinking of Malka bat Chayasura, Spencer Levy, Michael Klinghoffer, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Rivka bat Rachel, Leah bat Naomi, Gedalia ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sibia Devora bat Francis, Sylvia Orn, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriola Rose Spicer, Barbara Kushner, David Kyle Klotman, Lorraine Davis, Dina bat Chana, Chana bat Miriam, Dr. Harlan Spitz, Deborah Block Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Lydia Gold, Stanley Rappaport, Lynn Cowan, Michoel Ben Chananya, Karen Layton, Debbie Bookvar, Chris Klopp, Rivka bat Yehuda Vibela, Jerry Leibowitz, Mitchell Iden, Talia bat Sandra, Esther bat Sarcha, Gail and Richard Gambino, and Joshua Rose. In addition to the names that we just read out loud, if there are any additional names to share.
Michael Benester, Asher Yaakov Yachal, Mazal bat Adel, Arav Yeshayahu Ovadia ben Atam Shlomo, Arav Avigdor Moshe ben Prima, Akazan Zmera bat Ruth, Arav Miriam Yael Chaya bat Sarah, Awa Hambenim ben Gedas, Nachshon David ben Yael, Gerard Letty, Theodore Eastwood, Bari Cohen, and Chaim Moshe Baruch Shulman. Herbie Wilson.
Welcome our friends at home who are watching to add their names of their loved ones as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Alehem, V'Chalimam L'Rabatam L'Chazikam, Mishlach Lahem Behirav Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim, Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Hashtab Agalav Ezban Kariv and Amar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and the strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, el na refana la, el na refana la, refuah shelema, el na refana lo, el na refana lo, el na refana lo, refuah shelema. And we'll rise as we turn to page 370 at the bottom to lift and dress the Torah. Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Okay, please be seated. Here. So this morning's Haftarah, if you have a cloud chumash in front of you, can be found on page 1345. Page 1345. And this is coming from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 54, short, just verses 1 through 10. And again, this is part of a block of 7 Haftarot that we read traditionally from the end of Tisha B'Av, all the way carrying us to the high holidays, the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. Before we offer our reading this morning, we'll offer the blessing, which if you want to follow us on page 372 back in our Siddur. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nbi'im tovim, v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai Torah Moshe Abdo U'Yisrael Amo V'Nvi'eh Ha'emet V'Tzedek. Sing, O barren woman who has never given birth. Break out in song, you who have never been in labor. The desolate woman shall have more children than a woman who is married, says the Eternal. Enlarge the space for your tent. Do not spare the canvas for your dwelling place. Do not hold back. Lengthen your ropes. Drive in your pegs. For you shall spread out to the right and the left. Your offspring shall dispossess nations. Cities now deserted shall again be settled. Have no fear. You shall not be put to shame. Do not cringe. Your disgrace is at an end. You shall forget the shame of your youth. No more shall you remember your disgrace as a widow. For your husband is your maker, the one called God of heaven's hosts, and your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel, called God of all the earth. The Eternal calls you wife again. Oh, once abandoned and brokenhearted, once rejected, says your God, but a young wife still. For a brief moment I forsook you. With abiding love I take you back. In a moment of flooding anger I hid my face from you, but now, with love unending, I take you in, says your Redeemer, the Eternal. This is like the days of Noah to me. I promised that never again to cover the earth with the waters of Noah's days. So now I promise never again to be angry with you or rebuke you. Though the mountains may depart and the hills may be removed, my love shall never depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the one who loves you, the Eternal. Yeah, I mean, it ends better than it begins, probably. The metaphors are a little tough in some cases, but it's very apropos of the conversation we were having in our Heschel class this week on the prophets. And, Heschel making the argument that while many theologians and philosophers are uncomfortable with the concept of God that can feel anything, let alone love, because to attribute human attributes to God means to limit God in some form or the other. So goes that line of thinking. And Heschel basically argues very strongly in the opposite direction. And part of the reason why he has a strong leg to stand on is this, verses like this. You cannot read the prophets and try to make a coherent argument that suggests that God is some unfeeling, unmoving, all-knowing, but yet dispassionate entity of the world. It just doesn't, whatever the answer may be, it doesn't jive with the text. That's the gist of it. But in typical Heschel fashion, he says it much more eloquently than I just did. So it's worth the read. Even if you're not part of the class, it's worth the read at some point or other. Back to our Sidurim, to our prayer books, page 372 at the very bottom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'mdaber u'mkayem, shekol dvarav emet v'tzedek. Ala Torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al nevi'im ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'lemenucha lechavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach muvarchim otach yitbarach shimcha befi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat. Amen. We'll turn now to page 376 at the bottom to read a prayer for our country. We'll join together. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation, alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Together we say, Amen. Prayer for the State of Israel, page 377. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael, V'goalo, Barechet Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu. Again, Aleha Be'evrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha. Ushlach orcha v'amitcha l'rasheha sareha v'yotzea. V'tagneim be'etzat tova milfanecha v'natata shalom ba'aretz v'simchat olam le'yoshveha v'nomar. Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. And together we say, Amen. We'll turn back in our prayer books to page 374, and we'll rise in body or spirit as we conclude the Torah service at the top of the page. Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, ki nizkab shemo levado, odo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren liyamo, tila lechol chasidav, livnei Israel am kerobo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al tazohu. Etz chaim hi lamachasikim ba v'tomchecha meusha terachecha darchei noam v'chol netivotecha shalom. Ashivenu Adonai Eilecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. We'll remain standing as we turn to page 586 at the bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabech. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'ateit gdula liotzer breshit shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo samchalkenu kahem vegor aleinu kechol hamunam v'anachnu korim mishtachavim umodim Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Page 591. V'nehemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo We'll remain standing for those who are in mourning or those observing the yard site. Everyone else may be seated at this time. And begin by thinking of those who passed in our community in recent months. Martin Blake, Lynn Cowan, Faith Diskin, Linda Nath, Arlene Eber, Jay Fagan, Ellen Frank, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Gerald Hirsch, Mark Joseph, Jane Beard Cass, Gertrude Katz, Buddy Kossoff, Elaine Krotman, Emmanuel Kiprios, Leo Leibowitz, William Lippman, Sandra Tromberg Luongo, Norma Paulsek, David Sent, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Larry Warter, Peter Weinstein, Matthew Adam Zimmerman. We also mark the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Dr. John Abdrikin, Zipa Abdrikin, Tina Turoff Clark, Rose Elkin, Goldie Feinstein, Olga Gao, Beverly Grunwald, Jonathan Klyer, Max Matlis, Helene Chester Matlick, Sanford Matloff, Trudy Mendlovich, Minnie Mondenshine, Martin Ohl, Harry Olstein, James Rothschild, Sheldon Rudansky, Bessie Shockett, Eric Laura Segelstein, Sydney Segelstein, George Shaneswit, Hilda Siegel, Rose Spitz, Fanny Weinstein, and Maxwell Whitethorn. In addition to the names that we just mentioned, if anyone else has any other names, interesting Kaddish, and invite those at home, of course, to say names of your loved ones as well. And we will join together with the mourners on page 598. Yid Kadal ve'Yid Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irutei ve'amlich malchutei ve'chayechon uve'yomechon uve'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru. Amen. Yahei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'liyomei almaya. V'yit barach v'yish tavach v'yit pa'ar v'yit romam v'yit naseh v'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal Shemei d'kudsha b'richo. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom min romav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Zichronam Libracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Please be seated. And again, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. A few announcements. First is to join us for Torah study on Zoom at 12 o'clock. And really just to also give a real shout out to Emily Kutash for a great discussion last week in Torah study. We got to some pretty interesting stuff. And as usual, we didn't get close to getting to everything that she was hoping to discuss. So hopefully we'll find another occasion to come back to those conversations. But Emily did a wonderful job for our Women's Torah Commentary. So just a reminder again, we'll start at Zoom at 12. And for tomorrow, for various reasons, we decided to not have a booth at Harbor Fest this year, and we will probably be back next year, we hope. But in lieu of that, if anybody wants to meet up with me and most likely Eva at 1 o'clock tomorrow at the Windmill, we can walk around Harbor Fest together, go visit the food pantry. You guys got anything special this year, Howard?
Yeah, we have a booth. I'll be there from 10 to 12.
Yeah, no more oyster, or what was it again? Chowder competition. The chowder.
It's being sponsored this year by the guys from
Some other form of trade.
Jesse.
Oh, the same guys. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that place in South.
Oh, right. They bought the lobster inn. The
Yeah.
Mama at the lobster inn. That's
Kosher lobster.
kosher lobster place. That's good. Howard, with your hexture, I'm sure everything is kosher. But in any case, again, if you want to meet up, we'll see you at the Windmill at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And if not, of course, enjoy your time there. Yeah. Also, a reminder this week, Neda Mitzvah meets at 11:30 on Monday. My class on Heschel and the Prophets at 12 o'clock. First day of Hebrew school beginning at 3 o'clock. And the Social Justice Committee having its virtual meeting at 5 o'clock as well. On Tuesday at 11 o'clock, there is a tour of the Halleckville Museum and Farm. And Thursday evening at 7 o'clock is our next film shul course, this one titled Gangsters, Gunnufs, and Goons. Maybe we know some of these gangsters, gunnufs, and goons. Who knows? And reminder that a week, Jonas, well, is there such a thing as a non-Jewish gunnuf? Is that, the kosher nostra, yes, that's.
The Lasky crowd used to meet at Shapiro's Winery. No.
That's. It made it to Manishabit's factory. That's more appropriate. Reminder also a week from this evening, it'll be Saturday, September 17th at 8 o'clock. We'll have our Slichot service this year on Zoom only with an intention again. So I've got some things planned. 8 o'clock. Also, nobody's out there driving it late at night and all those things. We'll see how it goes, but we're excited about that. Any questions about the high holidays? Again, best to direct them probably to Eileen than to me, but I'll do my best to answer if we have any of them. But we're gearing up. We're looking forward. Howard's working very hard, get it all ready for us. These high holidays do not happen without Howard, that is for sure. So with that, I'll wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And any requests for closing this morning? I think that's there's something to study here, right? Whether it's unique to us or whether it's otherwise. But I'm never going to say no to you, though. Ezadav 628. 628. Yigal Elohim Chai ve'yishtabach nimtza b'yehiret el Metziuto echad v'yachid b'yechudo elam v'gam etzof le'achduto eno demuta guf ve'eno guf lo na'aroch elav kedushato kadmon l'chol davar Asher nivra rishon bereshit lereshito Eino adon olam lechol notzar yoreh gedulato malchuto shefra nevuato netan oel anshe segulato betifarto lo kam b'Yisrael kemo she'od Navi umavi tetunato Torah menatan le'amoel al yad v'hiyon eman beto lo yachalifael velo yamir dato le'olamim lezulato sofer v'yodea setareinu mabit l'sof davar bekadmato Gomer leish chesed kemifalo Noten Rasha Kerishato, Ishlach Leket Yamin, Veduhut Olam, Kol Chai V'yesh Yakir Yeshuato, Chaye Olam Nata B'tocheinu, Baruch Adei Ad Shem Tfilato, Chaye Olam Nata B'tocheinu, Baruch Adei Ad Shem Tfilato. Kiddush, page 604. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, ledorotam berith olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti leolam, oti leolam. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן ברך את יום השבת ויקדשהו ספרי, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. Amen. Hey, Chaim, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos to our camera friends. And Howard, I think if you guys want some you eat, some motzi or a little something else, we'll see you Thursday. Shabbat shalom.